Hi, everybody.
Later.
I'm going to talk a little bit, I guess, about philosophy and also a little bit of the paradox of retail of the future, which I'll explain later. So a little bit about, this is just about us. That's we want to also, by the way, leave a few minutes at the end for some Q&As. I guess that's part of the program. So anyways, if you're going to speak about the future, and you should speak about the future audience, which is Generation Z, and they're a totally different kind of breed of animal. Some have them as children. What's interesting about them, it's a huge group. It's 2.5 billion people at the moment worldwide. In about 5 years, I'll be 27% of the audience. And they really have a different experience of the world. You know, they experience the world corporally and also virtually and augmented. But also they value different things. They value experience over loyalty programs, et cetera. I won't read this whole slide because we're short on time, yes? And they also want experience and community. But here's something really interesting about them, which is they overwhelmingly like to shop in stores, yeah? So even though they shop online, they like in-store experiences a lot. And also use their phones, so it's a combination. It's a omni-channel experience for them. You know, do things like check prices, go into stores, try things on, et cetera, et cetera. This is interesting. This is the trends in technologies, right? What's interesting, it's like this all across the board. There's this huge swing up in all kinds of things, from data, connected devices, processing power, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, et cetera. Now, why this is important? Because anybody doing a project in the next 24 months, 24 months, 36 months, this is the environment, both the demographic environment and the technology environment those projects will exist in, yeah? So we look at this and we say, okay, so what's the framework for culture in the 21st century? We call it the 3 L's. You could probably put a lot of different things into these buckets. One is this idea about living labs. The other is legible cities, which is a humanistic view of the smart city. And the last thing is what we call liquid networks. I'll explain a little bit about each one of these briefly. So living labs is this idea, and you see this in some of the presentations where it's very breathy, that you bring in the user in the experiment itself. And you're starting to see this in a lot of retail innovation labs where they're bringing in end-user customers, testing out new products. They're doing this also with universities and other kind of programs. And they're looking for ways to figure out what works, doesn't work, because the environments are changing so rapidly. What you're seeing on the right is a project by Carlo Ratti with Italy. It's a food store. And this is where people come in and it's like a food farm. They grow their own food in this hydroponic thing. They could also see the progress of it online, and they come in and they pick it, right? So this is what Italy is experimenting with. So liquid networks. So in the context of brand and retail, we look at the 5G rollout. Again, this is something happening in the next 3 to 5 years. It's a totally different animal than 4G. It's 100 times the capacity and 20 times faster. So what that means is that all these kind of experiences like real-time data visualization, things they can use in technology in stores, this will make it all possible because it'll be a lot faster. So all the processing power doesn't necessarily happen in computer centers. It happens at the edge where the stores are, yeah? Now, what's interesting about this is also engender a whole set of different kind of businesses, different types of retail businesses. So, for example, 4G networks allow for things like Uber and Airbnb. Without 4G, they wouldn't exist. Yeah? The other thing is, though, is this dynamic connection to content and social impact programs. Very important for retail experiences, believe it or not. So this is legible cities. Legible cities, most of the smart cities stuff is focused on hard infrastructure, Infrastructure, economy, mobility, resiliency of food, energy, or water. Tiny piece of that is focused or interested in what we call the soft infrastructure. This is I guess you call it the Jane Jacobs view of the smart city. And this is like knowledge capital. This is where experience live. This is where cultural programs could have new types of engagement, and retail brands too. Now, so this is a project we did, and it's for Rubik's Cube. And what this does is the cognitive abilities you need to be able to be good at Rubik's Cube. Yeah, so it's not just only the product itself, but what's behind it. So this is a gesture-based experience. It does pattern recognition, sequencing, timing, things like that, right? This is something we did for Marvel brand. This travels around the world, and it's, again, it's an experience environment. It has physical, digital things that you do, rock climbing, gestures that bring up videos and images, interactive characters, and touch tables. Yeah, how are we doing on time? No timing. I go on forever. Okay. Yale School of Management. So this is like the Harvard School of Business. This is the school where they train the future leaders of corporations and different kind of organizations. And what this does is sort of express the brand of the school by showing how the real-time data of these different organizations run on the fly. Now, what's interesting about this, in addition to the screen, there's also these sort of rudimentary things like screens peppered throughout the building for, classes and schedule events, things like that. And they're connected to this spectacular display. This is a Norman Foster project. Another one, and no, this is not retail per se, but it's also another way to express a brand using a combination of digital and physical. This was a pop-up event for General Electric. Why are we getting that popping on the mic? A little close? Okay, how's that? Is that better? Yeah. Needs a pop filter. Okay, sorry about that. So this is General Electric. This was a presentation to the members of Congress, general press, and the public. And it's to express it's a experience of the General Electric brand across all sectors, all gesture-based, but it shows the entire life cycles of their products, from their fabrication, manufacturing, source materials, where they go throughout the world, supply chain, et cetera. This was a concept we did for Foster for the new Comcast building, and they wanted to get people have experience in the mall itself. So what you're looking at is these interactive gaming characters, 3D gaming characters, that appear behind the panels. We didn't want it to be like television or anything, or movies. And there's a series of sensors inside the lobby, and then you could interact with these characters. You could send them messages. They could tell you the weather, and it's a learning system, so you could develop, if you will, some kind of relationship with them over time. Right? Now, the reason we did that is because the building is a technology research center and also a hotel. It's a mixed-use building. Right? This is the thing we proposed for the lobby. This was, one of the things we were concerned about is that the challenges with putting screens in these public spaces, that they're so ubiquitous, they become like media white noise. How do you get people to be interested in? How do you make this into a destination? So what you're looking at is a high-resolution LED screen that's on a very thin, ultra-thin tension panels. They're carbon fiber. But they're run on a theater rig, so they change the shape and position according to what the content is. Yeah? So they're kind of like poetic and magical. Let's see what else we've got. Oh, yeah. So the future of brand and retail. Yeah? So I love this quote. This is Henry Ford, who said, if you ask people what they want, they would say faster horses. So it's always a challenge to get people to consider original ideas. We have different ideation processes for that, which I won't go over here, but there's ways to shift people's thinking, break their assumptions, and look at ways to consider what projects they're doing. And anyways, so what is the future of retail, of brand and retail? So one of them is this idea that it's not just a destination or a store that's in an environment or in the city. It's of the city. It's connected to it. It's really more of a network of relationships than just a place to buy products, because there's so many other options where you can buy products. So this is some of the things that these brands are experimenting with, to really push the boundaries. Chatbots, these sort of like Siri's is kind of like a chatbot. Facial recognition, drones, and robotics, This idea about these conversational interfaces where you can talk to something and it's a learning system, so you're not necessarily touching a screen. This is also interesting. Data-driven artificial intelligence dynamic pricing, which means that the pricing of things in the store could change on the fly according to who's in the store and what they're buying. Yeah. And this other thing is smart cameras that match patents, people's patents. So you could have cameras in the store that could see somebody look like they're wandering around the store, not trying to find things, and then that could alert a sales associate to come up and say, can I help you to find something? So part of this freaks me out. I don't know about you, but anyways, but here's the paradox, right? So that's all very, very good, this old fancy stuff. You look at the thing that the Generation Z is spending 98% in physical stores. We are at the cusp of, I call the slow food movement of technology, this kind of pushback, right? And you're starting to see it a bit in these corporations where they don't, especially technology companies, they don't want a lot of screens, right? They want more interpersonal relationships. Yeah? So this is what's happening in the world at the moment. Anybody familiar? Has anybody seen this in Sweden? This is wild. This is like, it's about 30,000 people doing this now. And to me, I'm not sure if I would want to do it. Where they're embedding an RFID chip in their body, in their hand, right? So instead of you having your credit card, or let's say going to a bank for your, for a cash machine, you just put your hand by the scanner and it identifies you, yeah? This is now, right? This is magic mirrors. You've seen them, heard about them, read about them. So this is where you combine magic mirrors with chatbots. So there's an artificial intelligence, like a virtual shoppers, right? That does things like image analysis of your coloration and body shapes. This is a project in Brazil. This is the Museum of Tomorrow. It's done with IBM Watson. And it's where you have an RFID card. You go up to it, tags you, identifies you, and then you can just talk to the museum itself. Changes the content on the fly according to your profile, right? And it's a learning system. So over time, it's not just this highly mediated set experiences, but it changes over time and over your experiences according to your profile. This is a great project. There's a great quote in Catch-22 who Yossarian says, he points to the building and says, of all the projects I had nothing to do with, this is the one I'm most proud of. So this is a project by Colorati Associates. This is going throughout Italy. This is the co-op stores in Italy, the market store. So what you're looking at, there's a series of augmented cameras and sensors in it. So if you wave your hand over a fruit or a product or something, it will give you the whole life cycle of the product. Where it was grown, what's it for, what's its allergens, right? What's the recipe for it, what's its disposal, what's the current pricing. So you say it's the wave of the future, but again, they're rolling this out across Italy, yeah? This is in South Korea, there are virtual stores. You could take photographs with your phone of a product you want and either pick it up to the store or have it delivered, yeah? So this is why I say in some ways that it's really more relationship and networks. It's not just a discrete environment. Now, I have no idea what this image is, but I liked it, so I threw it in there. But I can tell you what I think it is. I think this is like a robotic, soda dispenser or something that you can use your cell phone to order stuff in the street. So that's what I think it is. And then a little bit about the pivoting to new models. So if that's the environment we're talking about, the next 24 to 36 months, how do we pivot from where we are now to there? So these are the new models that we need to pivot from where we now are to where we need to go. So instead of just experience selling products, the experience itself is the product. You're seeing this in malls in London, across the United States. So it's not just a point of purchase, it's a point of discovery, right? It's not just branding moments, but these highly engineered micro branding moments, yeah? Personalized, so it's not just one brand messages and one brand narrative, it's actually a flexible one. So it goes from just not being a retail store, but a customer experience node. Again, this idea about networks. And then this idea of not distributing products only, but also distributing experiences. Now, part of this is also things like See, it's interesting because Generation Z is also very interested in authentic experiences and also where stuff is made from. They're very highly aware of social responsibility. So in a lot of ways, they're also aware what these brands are doing with social responsibility programs, right? Like, where's the material from? Who's making this product? So in some ways, it really calls for more authentic experiences, not these kind of, highly mediated, thin messaging, if you will. And then this idea that then at that point, in the next 5 or 10 years, stores will transition from being a physical store to this really interesting, sensor-rich, infinitely adaptable stage, right? Experiential stage. So I did this for fun. This is like an emoji customer journey of the future, yeah? So you have this woman, Roberta. She wants to buy a bag. She goes online or her phone or wherever it is. She asks her group, which is family and friends, to verify and her choices. She can either order online, it's sent to her house, or she goes to the store. At the store, she finds out about the social responsibility. She has some personalized experiences for food, a massage, or whatever. And then she can do a variety of activities. She can go an artificial intelligence chatbot magic mirror that makes suggestions according to her profile of like, oh, you want the bag, but here's the shoes and here's the dress. And then she could also do things like 3D print a sneaker, which is Nike's experimenting with now. Or these ideas of these, with these, I guess you call them, what they call them? Yeah, behavior store cameras, right? That sort of match, by looking at her, matches her actually her pathway through a store. And then, of course, there are Amazon and other people experimenting with drone deliveries. And then she gets the gifts, and you have a happy customer. Yep. So that's my presentation, brief and sweet. Let me know if you have any questions, anyone?
Hey, so I'm Katie Sprague. I have worked with CallisonRTKL for a very long time. And I'm a really good counterpoint to Eli. I think Eli and I talked about how to talk about the future of retail to you. And you can tell Eli's on the cutting edge. He's got his head in the clouds. He's seeing where the trends are coming from. I, on the other hand, am kind of firmly planted on the ground. I'm a little bit analog by nature and holding very tightly to the world that I know. So we're kind of a nice bookend. But wanted to show you, at least from the world of architecture, what some of the digital trends are looking like today. So I wanted to show you some of our projects and then just some other things that we think are kind of cool in the world out there. I am also keenly aware that as the last speaker, I am standing between you and that crafted cocktail at the bar on the strip, so I'm going to try really hard not to go too slow. So in our world, as I say, CallisonRTKL, we've been doing retail for about 75 years, really long time. And I'd say about half that time, people are telling us, ooh, this retail apocalypse, the world is coming to an end. And that particular sentiment has been ramping up in the last couple of years since online has really taken a bite out of traditional retail. My take is that yeah, things had to change, and especially the digital influence over that world has caused retailers to change or die, and we've seen that. So what I think of is this situation has honestly risen to some of the most innovative retail practices that we've seen in years. People are rising from the ashes in ways we never could have imagined. And this digital influence, in my mind, is having this kind of cool influence by not being an either-or situation anymore. It used to be the big debate between online versus bricks and mortar, and now it's really a much more interesting blend, right? So we're seeing things that are part molecular, part digital, and that kind of blend between the two is also creating some pretty interesting scenarios. And I would say one of the biggest changes that we've seen on the architectural front is that it used to be also in the old days that the architects would come by the environmental graphic design department and the brand strategy group where I work and say, okay, I've drawn the big rectangle for the Jumbotron, just put it in there. And we'll be digital, right? We're entering the digital age, here's where the screen goes. In this day and age, We still get that every now and then, but mostly what we get are a really interesting array of new digital technologies that are changing the building. They're integrated with it. They're using it for projection mapping. It's becoming interactive. There are all these different things that truthfully are putting that Jumbotron a little bit to shame. So we always really like when the architects and clients push us to think about digital in ways beyond the screen. So with that, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how we see changes in the retail business, not just from our position as brand strategists or environmental graphic designers, but how are our clients changing? What are the customers doing that are really requiring that the business we do going forward is a lot different than the one we've known for so many years? So the first rule that I think is pretty basic, and everybody who's spoken today has used the experience word, but it really is that we're finding now retailers are getting it. They are valuing experience over transaction. And they understand that trade-off, that if that linear path to purchase doesn't necessarily result in a sale today, what they're looking for is engendering loyalty and getting people to experience that brand in a way that they might not if they're just shopping for a product. This is a project, Nike Unlimited Stadium in Manila, designed by BBH out of Singapore, is the world's first LED running track. And it's set up to be a really interesting experience where runners create an avatar based on their own time and then get to race themselves in this cool digital medium. They can also choose from an avatar, a library of avatars of world-class runners, if they're actually pretty brave, and see themselves in this track. And what's pretty cool is that there isn't a shoe in sight, right? They're not selling shoes in this environment. I don't even know that there are really any that you can buy if you wanted to. But they are reaching out and engaging customers in a digital experience that allows them to see themselves in this new environment. So the idea of digital that is personalized and catered to a particular person and runner and lets them interact and create what they want to is definitely a wave of the future. Second idea about a big change, I'm calling it from madmen to mathmen. And that has as much to do with how products are brought to the industry as it does with us designing the spaces to hold them. And everybody's hearing a lot about big data and analytics, and how are we using ideas like that to influence what we do in the store? Our thought is this idea of data allowing us to build this 365-degree of our client's client, right? Who's the customer? Understanding that changes everything. So Petco is a store that we've worked for a long time, and our New York office was approached by them a couple years ago with the request to design a concierge desk. And their thought was, hey, we need to go digital. So if we have a desk and there's somebody with a computer at the desk and they can access Google, we could answer a lot of questions that come into us from the person standing at the desk. Digital strategy, right? And we're thinking, really? I don't quite get that. So the question we had to them was, hey, let us do, I know you didn't hire us to do this. I know you want to think about that desk, but let us partner with a group that we work with a lot, Circus Strategies out of Seattle, who does really great customer research. And together we kind of worked with Petco, came up with the idea that, you know what, you might think your consumer is a bunch of crazy cat ladies, but in fact it's not. What this deep dive into the consumer actually told us and Petco is that there's an entire market of people that they were not reaching. Millennials, high degree of disposable income, way more money than time, who were looking to become great pet parents. They just didn't have the time to do it, but they were really interested in pampering their pets. So that discussion that went from, I need a desk, to, let's take a look at your customer, to, wow, there are new people who want new things, eventually led to not the creation of an environment, but the creation of a new business line. So we talked Petco into changing their retail strategy entirely, or at least adding to it. And the end result was a space that had literally nothing to do with the desk and everything to do with technology that was invisible. It was all about getting data, allowing the data to infiltrate the design process, and resulting in this space called Pet Coach, where people came to have their dogs groomed and trained and taken care of at daycare, and they could see a vet, and of course, they could visit their best pet friends on the Instagram post, right? So this completely changed what Petco had been doing, which was a commodity business. They built a space with shelves, they put food on it, people bought it, but as soon as people figure out they can get dog food delivered at a much cheaper price from Chewy.com, Petco's long-term viability didn't look so good. All of a sudden, they're in the business of service. They've captured an audience they never knew they had who is willing to spend twice the money than anybody buying dog food ever would have. So for us, an invitation to think about digital through a desk ended up changing our client's business proposition. So the third example, magnify the moment. Okay, I know I said screens were not necessarily the wave of the future, or at least we're seeing less of them. Every now and then it really is about the screen. So this project is called Oceanwide, and it's in LA. It's right across the street from Staples Center. It's a part of LA Live, the sports and entertainment district that our firm designed about 20 years ago. So it's actually kind of fun to see the other parts around Staples come together when they've been in the works for a very long time. And way back when, even before digital technologies were what they are today, we had the idea that this space needed a really big screen. It sits across the street from Staples Arena, which is kind of the Times Square, I guess you might say, of downtown LA, if there is such a thing. And in fact, the owner, AEG, had always talked about wanting this to be the hub of all the activity that happens in LA. So we weren't thinking about this just as that digital screen. We were thinking of it as a district identifier, right? It needed to function on an urban scale to communicate those magic moments that are happening all around it. So whether it's, the Lakers finally winning the NBA again. Oh, no, wait, that's too crazy. Maybe Beyonce coming out for her finale. People in town can gather here and be part of that moment, but have it magnified. So you might say it's the pixels are just part of the story, but at this scale, we're really thinking it's an urban intervention. My fourth story is about the soft sell, and that's really looking at brands who are getting the idea that we can really disrupt how the path to purchase is working in some pretty innovative ways. So Sonos is a high-end sound system that, for the most part, had its inspiration, its launch onto the market digitally. They didn't have so much a big store presence, but when they decided they needed to add that, they built a flagship store in New York and realized that speakers sitting on shelves are not engaging in a way that music needs to touch people emotionally. So what they built were 7 little rooms, each patterned off a different room in a house, and they invited their guests to come experience music the way they wanted to. They could run it from whatever kind of device, including a record player or a tape recorder, whatever they chose, in an environment that they could control, and they could do it privately. And so that experience really allowed people to connect on an emotional level with this brand in a way they never could have, either online or just looking at stuff on shelves. So we kind of think of this as brand immersion, or really creating that sense of wonder that will connect people to the brand of Sonos. And we think this is kind of interesting, even if you push it a little further, that that path to purchase I talked about is kind of this linear thing. Even in today's day and age, a product gets pushed, whether it's in store or through a website, and the sale is the ultimate goal. But really, what we're seeing now is that people are coming to market with experiences. Depending on how that goes, you might market it, you might test it through social media, see what kind of reaction you're getting. Is it garnering lots of hits? Is it becoming something that people follow? That's a really great testing venue. At the end of that cycle, maybe you decide you have a product, and at the end of that, a store. So really what this kind of model is saying is it's just completely deconstructed that path to purchase. So new models to getting to products. The Museum of Ice Cream is a good example of this, right? It's just kind of this cool experience that's now kind of bopping around the country. This one right now is in San Francisco, and may eventually work its way into being a legitimate store. You can buy products there now, but it started as an experience, is being tracked through social media, gaining followers, and eventually may be a viable product. And then lastly, wouldn't really be a speech if I didn't get to poke the bear a little bit, but the way I feel about it, and certainly the way I think some Gen Z folks are thinking about that, so much screen time is starting to kind of dig into our souls, and it's refreshing to see that from the younger ones, right? So the idea of maybe looking for a little bit of a balance between real life and online life is changing the way retailers are thinking about their experiences. And I'm telling you, adults are leading the pack here with these stats. We're spending almost half a day engaging with media. And the teens are not so far behind. You know, they're about 10 hours a day for kids to be engaged with their phone. But they're also reporting at the same time, in the middle of this environment that's full of these friends all around them, although they're virtual, teens are expressing a really high degree of loneliness and depression. And they're starting to ask for things that have nothing to do with digital. Record sales had a really high percentage of kids under 25 buying them, about 25% last year by kids under 25. They're expressing interest in things like, hey, why don't we go outside? Or let's read a book, right? Novel ideas. So REI, this is one of our flagship stores that just opened this year in Washington, D.C. And I show it to you not because it's a model of modern digital achievement, but because it's not. There's definitely digital underlay there. You're not likely to see it. It helps to connect social networks. It helps to understand how the store functions. But really what you go there for is to connect. So you have a chance to connect with the bike expert who will help you work on your bike with your own hands and own tools. You even have a chance, if you don't feel like buying something, to go to the REI store, to sit outside in this nice little courtyard to engage in an event or a class or a conversation with a person that really is all about the creation of community. And I think what REI gets is that in that interaction, they are attracting people who are of like mind and living according to a value system that REI also belongs to. So they are very carefully crafting a tribe of people who are immensely loyal to them. And what they have done for us is they've taught us that a store can be redefined to really be a communal space. So with all that, we have something many years ago that in the architectural community we signed up for called Architecture 2030, all about global challenges, a lot about sustainability, targets we all promised we'd hit, but to us 2030 seemed like the future, the crazy future. How are we ever going to get there? But I would tell you that with technologies that we're seeing today, with retailers who are innovative and willing to take chances and redefine what the idea of digital means and how to balance that with things that are as basic as human interaction, that future for us is all looking pretty bright. But it is right around the corner, just a few years away. With that, any questions?